like to call the Tirz, or the Tax Increment Reinvestment Zone Committee meeting to order this day, September the 8th at 4:03 in the afternoon. Our next order of business is invocation. Can I call on my friend Fred Gamble to give our invocation?
Thank you. Will you pray with me? Most gracious and wonderful Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for this beautiful slice of heaven we call the Texas Hill Country. We thank you that we can live in a place like Kerrville, Texas, where we get to serve each other freely and friendly. Lord, there's a lot of craziness going on in the world, but we ask that you keep us in our right mind, keep us purpose-driven, keep us mindful, Lord, that everything we say, everything we do all to your glory. In your name we pray, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Fred. Next on the agenda is our approval of minutes, 3A. I think everyone should have received their minutes via email. Do we have any corrections or additions, or can I entertain a motion for approval?
Move we approve.
Second.
Motion made by John, second by Catherine. Any more discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Number 4A is our semi-annual reports, update on the various downtown projects, et cetera. Michael?
Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee, thank y'all so much. It is nice to see everybody, even though it seems like it's only once or twice a year. We do hope to maybe change that as the years move on and we have some more funding in those coffers and bring projects back to you. But for now, projects that have come through this body have not existed yet. So not to say that we haven't been doing projects, there just hasn't been sufficient funding to get that moving. And we're hoping to change that today. Since January, when you last met, I would say that's probably the biggest change in downtown is the opening of the ramp at the library and the installation of the completion of the HVAC out there. That was a 95-degree sweltering place for the librarians for quite a bit of time. So that was really, really nice that was able to get completed. Challenges that we've been facing going back to January as well and continuing today is just supply chain stuff. So projects that we have on the books, projects that private developers have on the books have been elongated, slightly delayed, coupled with the rising interest rates. So we've been having a lot of conversations with developers, kind of starts and stops. Everybody's a little weary right now to kind of move forward with all these projects. We did complete a design build for the HHHC, which is the Heart of the Hills Heritage Center. So you guys are gonna have to help me if you see me in town, because I'm gonna mess up names and names of buildings and things like that. So that's gonna be a really interesting project. An executive director has been hired, and they're moving their way through with that. And so we did that as a design build, and that's a combination of private donations and money from hotel occupancy tax. And so we are at now the request for proposals stage, or will be at the request for proposal stage, from 5 bidders for that project. And we'll narrow that down to our selection and hopefully get moving and get the ball rolling. I don't think the public safety facility falls within the confines of the Tirz, but that did pass in May. And while it's not a downtown project, it will free up some possibilities for that facility when the time comes for the current police station. Bruce and folks in the broker's business are gonna figure out the best way to make that space available to other folks and get interested in it. Additionally, on the kind of the western edge on Pascal Avenue, upgrades to the streets and the sidewalks, and going beyond Pascal Avenue, going towards dang it, Across the Public Works yard.
McFarland.
McFarland, thank you, right there.
Sorry.
Lots of projects going on over there. And I'd say the other big residential project that's going on downtown is the townhomes that are being constructed over off of C Street and Water. So that's kind of the gist of all the projects. With that, I'll turn it over if y'all have any questions. How are you, sir?
Wonderful. How are you? Sorry.
That's all right.
It happens sometimes.
Yeah. Well, that's about what I got.
Before I turn it back over to Kenneth, any questions for Michael on the updates from anyone?
Just one related to a project that was talked about, I guess, through the life of this group, was the possibility of a hotel development, and it's been mostly off, sometimes on. Is that
It's
proceeding?
it's in flux. So it's status quo a little bit for that, right? So we have been approached by a few folks. I think they're trying to pencil out how that works for them. And as the interest rates started to rise and as the supply chain issues kind of have been exacerbated, they've been, they're still talking, and we are still talking about it. I think it's just kind of paused for a minute until they can recalibrate and see where everything shakes out, which hopefully happens soon, right? Interest rates are starting to go in the right direction, and that's nice for all of us to hear. And so we're hopeful. We're still continuing the conversations, but no construction plans as of yet.
Any other questions? It is now yours, sir.
All right. So tell
we
me
just-
what number we're on.
We just completed 4, so you'll start with 5.
Wonderful, wonderful.
All right. Take it away.
Oh, thank you. All right. Again, I apologize. I had a customer call right as I was walking out, and I had to take the call, so I apologize for that. So I guess we're going to look at the proposed budget in this presentation, right?
We are.
Okay, great.
Make sure I got- There we go. Okay, so I'm gonna, before we get into proposed budget, just give you a little bit of background and a little bit of history of kind of where we are now, so you have some ideas going in to what we're proposing. So just a little reminder, 2018 was our base year, so that was tax year 2018, so fiscal year 2019. With collections in the Tirz area of 542,237, and that's the year that we actually developed that geographical area. Then in fiscal year 2020 was the first year we actually had an increment, was 22,899. So basically the collections that we show each year for revenue for this board is just the difference between the base year and the increase in valuation, and that's where we calculate the revenue from. 2021 went up a little bit. This information here was included in your annual report. Looking at 22 and where we are now, we had a budget of 62,641, and we've talked a couple of times about potential exemption filings and those things. Some property that the county bought that's since become exempt, and so my estimation, if it's right, is we're gonna hit right around 56, 57,000 after those exemptions have come in. And been filed, and I'll give you a little bit more. So you can see we have about 5,300 still outstanding. So if that 5,000 is collected, which the tax assessor feels like it will be, that those are reliable payers, that will be in the neighborhood of 115,000 in fund balance at the end of this year. So it gets a little interesting when we start talking about 23. So here's some comparisons, and we don't have to go through all these, but I think they're important that you realize what's going on in this area. So total increase in market value, $38 million. That's huge. So when we first got these numbers, when our certified roll and started doing calculations, we hesitated a lot. Contacted Kirkad, and we asked for a listing of comparison properties from valuations from 21 to 22's tax year. Took a look at those, looking at any new properties that were added, but the large majority of this increase is a change in the way commercial properties were valued. So in looking at them property over property, just some big increases on those. So With that being said, the ARB worked through a multitude of protests. As of the time this report was made, which was right after certified roll, so the end of July, there were still about 11 properties or $4 million in value that was under protest. So how that has come out yet, we're not sure. I know there's still a few that they're working through. But the big kind of driver here was there are some top line agreements in place with the ARB. And basically what that is, and this was a learning for me too, is if I protest my valuation and the ARB and I can't agree, then there's a top line agreement put into place, which basically says ARB is not going to give, or we're giving to X amount, and then that notice is given to that property owner, and then they have the right to either appeal or then go through arbitration through the state. So the period of time there can be lengthy. So the reason I say that is because when I show you the increase in revenue, I want you to be cautious about budgeting a whole lot against the 23 revenue. Do I think it was going to definitely exceed 22? Absolutely. HEB's fully appraised this year, so that was a big number. We've had a couple other businesses open up in that area that are new, so those valuations were significantly, made a pretty big impact. But the ones that we don't know that will be potentially appealing, still, we don't know. So I think by the time we meet next time, I'll have better information for you, because there is a window for appeals time, and I've been working with KCAD to kind of keep me in the loop on that. So more to come on that. So you can see here, and this was kind of a conservative estimate after, just knowing what all we know. But jumping from, me budgeting $62,000 to me budgeting $280,000 is quite a difference. Now on $39 million, that is a pretty hefty difference. However, we're going to be watching those other ones that have those top line agreements and see what happens over the next few months. If they do protest, they may not protest. They may be okay with the review board's decision and go ahead and pay those taxes accordingly. But they do have the right to protest, so we do need to know that.
So just so I understand, and I'm going to ask you a
okay.
percentage question. So estimated revenues that come from the increment and the portion of the increment we get, right, is 56,212 for 22.
For 2022.
That's the difference between 21's value
That's
and
correct.
22's value. So the estimate for between 22 and 23 is it
The difference in the base year?
$280,000 in revenue for this fund?
Correct. Difference from the base year to the 2022 tax year.
2018 to 2022.
Oh,
Correct. The base
so
year,
it's-
yes,
goes that
the
far
base year
back.
never changes.
Based on change.
The base year never changes. So basically, if this property was valued at X in tax year 2018, every time it grows, that money goes into the Tirz.
So what is the percentage annually that we get of that increment?
All of it.
All of it.
Oh,
In,
So ju-
in this
Right.
zone.
in the
In
zone.
our zone.
In
I
that
got
zone,
that.
correct.
Properties in our
Got
zone.
Dude,
So, so then you take $1 million property and you put a $15 million value,
Correct.
a building that's built on it.
The 15 million value goes into the Tirz, and the difference between the 14 million becomes increment, or the value, the tax rate on the 14 million becomes increment.
2.76 or something like that. Is that the tax number?
No, it's only the city.
It's gonna be
portion.
the city portion,
That would
it's
be
only the
correct.
city portion, so, the, 5750 or whatever it is, 5750 for this year. So that much of that value differential, but it all goes into the Tirz. So the base year, the value on the base year, all of that taxation goes into the general fund or to the debt fund, depending on how that's split.
Can you go back to the previous slide?
Yes,
I was looking at the number 35.5, non-home site improvement, change in value from prior year. The 35.5 number. That's basically commercial property
correct.
valued up.
That's
Of
correct.
which 4 million is probably being contested, right?
Well, 4 million as of the end of July was still under protest. So the way they
So-
handle,
Worst case is 31.5.
not necessarily, because 4 million of valuation is under protest. So they're gonna go with, let's say that was
So say they-
$100,000 in
Say they
taxes.
agree it's 3 million.
Value though.
Yeah,
not
you
taxable
understand,
dollars.
so, but the 35.5 is not gonna change very much.
Shouldn't. That's, unless there's some arbitration that overturns the ARB.
But it can't go below 35.1 or 31.5. even
Right,
with
so the
zero.
way they do it is, and I don't have that number in front of me, but the way that Kirkcad does it is they say, okay, if your value is $100,000 today, that's what we're proposing, and it's $50,000, they're not gonna lower it below what it was. So when they ever give us the certified roll, the number that they give us for calculation is the lower of the value. Does that make sense?
Yes, and the 4.1 million is the total valuation, not the increment.
Correct, that's the total valuation under protest.
If
So-
it goes down, it's not gonna go below
Significant.
what the increment was. It's
That's right.
not a big change to us.
Shouldn't be a big change.
So it could only be 400,000.
Could
If
be.
it went down 10%, be 400,000 out of 35.5,
Correct.
which is nothing.
Right. The part that I stand a little bit weary of is the ones that have already been protested, have already been, I guess, quote unquote, settled via those top line agreements that could come back and file suit. And I don't know who those are. But for example, HEB's $8 million value. So if they protest that and it comes down to $6 million, then the difference would then come out of.
Well, that was my second question. Other 35.5 delta increase. The only thing that I can remember seeing significant in the Tirz zone is changes HEB, and that's only 8 million.
Right, in the change, because remember the old property, yeah, it's just the change
So
in
the
that.
delta of the 8 million of the 35.5, only 8 million of that is the delta from HEB.
Correct.
So the other 27.5
Is from.
is somewhere else.
And what we're seeing is, when I looked at them property to property, there's a lot of, they were 300,000 and now they're 400,000, or they're 300, but now they're 375. So, I mean, it was significant enough increase that I would think they potentially protested. I don't have a list of all those commercial protests, but in looking at the value change, I can see which ones could have potentially. But out of all the protests, only these 11 remained as of July 31st. And again, that could have changed. They could have resolved some of those between then and now. So, very possible. And we just don't have an update. I'm not as worried about this $4 million in protests because, as you said, that's not going to have a significant impact if those are valued at the lower or some mid value that's agreed upon between the ARB and the customer. However, the unknowns are the ones that have been through ARB already, that they've said, we're going to agree to disagree, but go ahead and file for arbitration if you want to. Those are the ones we don't know. So, and as of the last time I talked to the Kirkcad, they had a couple of weeks to send those notices out, just saying, this is what we're sticking with. These are your options as far as what you can do. And then the customer has a certain period of time, and I'm sorry, I don't know what that is, to then go back to Kirkcad and say, okay, we would like arbitration, or we're going to file a suit, or whatever the case may be, depending, I guess, on the value and the customer. So that's really what we're watching over the next few months are any of these that we're going to say are certified because ARB said, no, this is what we're staying with, going to come back and have some sort of impact on us.
Gotcha.
And even so, it's not going to bring us back down to $50,000 because there's clearly increases in value in the Tirz. We just have to really watch that closely over the next few months and see if that value changes, and I'll keep that up to date. And if I see something major, then I'll tell Keisha, and she can notify that way, and you can decide if we want to meet and reevaluate this or not. But given the information that we had, this is the calculation. So if all things stand, and these guys that are under still protest come in even at the lower value, I mean, the calculation is what the calculation is, and we probably did it 10 times. Talked to Kirkcad about it multiple times. We looked at properties year over year and feel very comfortable as long as we don't have any kind of squirrely stuff that happens with protest or arbitration.
Well, Julie, there has to be an end to this.
There is.
There has to be a deadline, like, this is
Right.
it, right? And we don't know what that is.
I don't know what that is. The last time I talked to Kirkcad, they were in the process of sending out the letters and they weren't dated yet. So I told her that I would circle back with her in about a month and find out, what they'd heard. Do they have any that have requested arbitration or, sought counsel or something like that? So hopefully, I'm hoping by mid-September we'll have some kind of answer from them as far as what they're expecting. But I mean, exactly like exemptions, they have 2 years to come back and file. So when you see that we've refunded some things out of this, as we talked about, if someone buys a property, they have up to 2 years to come back and file for a tax exemption, and then there's a refund involved. So there's a lot of unknowns, and that's different when you're dealing with, a $5 or $10 million budget of a refund of, $20,000 than if you're dealing with, $100,000 budget, or in this case, hopefully a $300,000 budget now. So you can see it a lot more clearly in these cases. Okay. Anything? Okay, so what I'm proposing, estimating, and I already see a typo. So I didn't change the fund balance on the starting fund balance on 2023 there. That should have carried over from the 2022 estimate. So starting the year with 115,000, if all things go as planned and as they should, adding, over 200,000 to the fund this year. And a little bit of interest revenue. You can see we actually laughed a little bit at putting $1,000 in there over, the 250 that we have. So for our side, like Michael said, interest rates are looking better for us. And then no expenditures budgeted at this time, just based on our prior year. I'm sorry.
396.
Oh yes. So yeah, once that changes, the 115 ending fund balance will be 396. So I'll make that correction. When we did this, we didn't have any increment, so we didn't have the estimate in there. When I plugged the estimate, I didn't carry over the fund balance. Any other budget questions or?
So we have $402,000 to spend, that's what you're telling me?
No,
No, 396.
maybe.
My $7,000.
Good try, though.
I think historically, we've budgeted appropriately, but we've never hit that revenue budget.
Right, and because we don't know those strange refunds that we have to do, so.
Kind of a optimistic budget revenue.
I was a little bit conservative, just because of my fears, so, I would have to go back to my calculations, but it's pretty close. Given anything unusual, someone files exemptions, and usually, we talk to the tax assessor quite a bit, and he'll let us know, this property sold, and so you might want to be watching for this, and we knew that last year, with a couple that had sold during the year, and he let us know, these sold, we haven't seen any exemption filing yet, and he's real good about letting us know we're gonna have to refund this. And even that, even if there was those things, just given what we know as far as what's sold in the last few years, it should be small. If there's any exemptions out there, it's nothing big that we don't know about already as far as the Tirz area. Because there are a lot of exempt properties within that geographical area as well.
One more time.
Nope.
Can you go back to the previous slide?
Yep,
What I'm still struggling with.
okay,
To me, this says that there's a 35% increase in taxable valuation in commercial property in downtown Kerrville. And their taxes are gonna go up 35%.
no, because you have a cap on there as well. So remember, if your house is
No,
$100,000.
on commercial property.
Oh yeah, commercial doesn't have a cap.
So are we hearing, I don't know, are we hearing business owners down here just raising questions?
We haven't heard a lot of fussing. I would have to, I don't want to give you dollars without looking at it, but I can go back easily within our spreadsheet
Am I
calculations
reading
and
this
figure.
right?
Yeah, because if you look at the home
35%
site,
increase in taxes?
well, home site and non-home site, so those added together, that's the biggest reason that I had conversations with Kirkad,
No,
because,
but it's increase in valuation.
right,
So
not
it's
taxes.
not
Not
just-
taxes,
Just the taxes.
the value of the property.
The HEB valuation of 8 million is in that number. It's not just appraisal increase.
That's right.
It's all new properties.
Right, so there is new
Let's take
valuation.
HEB out of it, so.
Right, so if you take that out of it,
non-HEB is
that's a pretty
27.
big chunk, that's a pretty big chunk to pull out of it. And if we back that out, what that would do to the percentage, I'm not sure if you have a calculator, but that would have a pretty big impact on that percentage. And then there's also, I believe, and I'd have to go back and check and see if Duncan is on the roll for this year or not, when they actually completed. I know it's small, but that's still a pretty big valuation.
Well, arguing with the numbers, I'm just trying to
Sure.
understand if I was a business owner down here, what I'm thinking.
Well,
thinking
and again, I think basically what I'm hearing, or what I understand, is there have been some improvements made
Yes,
that are accounting for part of that. In a number of buildings that may have been valued very low, and then they've
across the street.
moved them off and then built something new in its place, over the period of time of the tax, calculation.
Well, and also keep in
So-
mind, sometimes things like that, like you're talking about the one across the street, good example, is it might take, if they are working on it through the year, it might take 2 years for that to actually catch up. And that sometimes can be a problem in the property tax world, especially when we're dealing with revenue, because
You got the delay.
it takes a
Design.
while, right, it takes a while to actually recognize new value, sometimes up to 2 years, depending on where the stop date was, because it's as of January 1. And did they actually appraise that area that year? And, there's so many factors that can go into that, so.
So you could probably go back 3 years and look at the improved properties in our,
Right.
in the zone that have either,
Identify that.
yeah, and identify that change.
Yeah, it's pretty easy to see when she sent me the year-over-year spreadsheet, it's pretty easy to see, and it made me a little more comfortable looking at property to property, to be able to say, okay, now I understand there's $2 million of it, there's $8 million of it, and you can kind of line it up and almost buy it. And then some of the ones that had some pretty hefty increases, you would assume had protests, and so most of them have been settled with the exception of that $4 million value. So to answer your question, we're not getting bombarded with, look how crazy my taxes have gone. I just think there's improvements that are catching up, and then I think there's some new things going on, and I think you're gonna continue to see that, especially with some things going on Water Street. We're gonna continue to see some growth.
Thank you.
Anything
Very
else?
good.
Okay, so
Any
what
other
we're,
questions on the budget?
yep. So what we're asking for, if there are no other questions, was just, this board's approval of this budget. It is included in our overall fiscal year 23 budget, presentation to council, so it will require their approval as well, which will happen on Tuesday, as long as you approve. If any changes need to be made, we can certainly do that.
Very good. So we're looking for a motion to approve the budget as presented.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
With the
Motion.
changes?
With the
We'll do
change.
that next. And then a second.
Well, no, I was to approve it
That's amended.
as corrected.
Okay.
Yes,
So-
I'll correct the fund balance. I mean, the fund balance really isn't part of the budget, so we're really just approving the revenues and no expenses. So
Very good.
the
So-
yeah, the fund balance isn't part of the approval.
Change your motion to approve it as amended?
Yes.
Okay. And then a second
Yes.
to the motion as amended. All those in favor, raise your right hand. And that passes unanimously.
And if I have updates that have significant impact, I'll definitely let you guys know.
Very good. Thank you. All right, item 5B, which is a request from the city of Kerrville, Texas for a project funding not to exceed an amount of $100,000. And I think this was also in our package. So welcome.
Hello.
I don't know that we've met,
I
so
have not. My name is Megan Folkerts. I am the senior management analyst for the city of Kerrville.
Okay.
And I'm also the Main Street liaison, which is why we're coming to you today. It's within the Tirz boundary.
very good.
So we're coming today with a funding request for the Texas Community Development Block Grant Program that we have been awarded funding for. So it's a Main Street program through the Texas Historical Commission, Texas Department of Agriculture, and federal HUD. So basically, this grant program comes in to areas that need public improvements, ADA accessibility improvements, sidewalk improvements. And in March of this year, we were formally notified that we are going to be awarded $350,000 for 3 projects downtown. So the first major project area is at Earl Garrett and Water Street, and it is a complete redo of the signalization there. So it's going to feature new mast arms, new lights, curb ramps. I think we're going to be adding a turn lane there. So that's the first area that this is going to be addressing. The second major area is right in front of the Heart of the Hills Heritage Center at the intersection of Water and Clay. And right now on Fridays at the farmers market, they have a 3-way pedestrian, it's a temporary crosswalk stop. And so this is actually going to be installing it permanently. So that's that area. And then if the funding allows, we do have some tree well areas at 4 parts of Water Street downtown to help with the bricks that the trees have uprooted. So these are just the main project areas that this covers. So we do have to match funding for this. So we are requesting that the board approves funding the city's matching portion and any potential overages. So currently, we do have a little bit of an overage in our engineering contract. So with those and the anticipation that our construction costs are going to be significantly higher than they were estimated at the beginning of last year, we're just asking for funds not to exceed $100,000 to hopefully counteract what those overages may be. So currently, we are under contract with Kimley Horn, and they are engineering the design of everything right now, and we are expecting construction to begin early 2023. One more thing we just wanted to cover as a reminder, I did go back through the project and financing plan that was approved in 2018, and the little snippet at the bottom was on page 11, and this just shows the project costs that you all are allowed to fund, and highlighted there is street and intersection improvements. So it is commercial development downtown, public infrastructure. So just wanted to remind you all that that is included in what you're able to fund. So do y'all have any questions? Sure. Which slide would you like to see? This one? Sure.
So tell me about the match.
So the match is 15% of the overall project cost. So we are responsible for $52,500.
Okay.
That is the main match that we are required to give. Currently, there's an overage in our contract with the engineering firm of right under $24,000. So with those added, and then just trying to give us a little bit of wiggle room just in case we are a little bit over in the construction budget as well.
So, you're required to match 15% of the total budget. So what's the total budget of the project?
So we're required to match 15% of the grant award, which is the $350,000.
Okay.
And then we are responsible for paying for anything over what that grant awarded. So we are responsible for $52,500 on paper, and then anything over that currently.
Anything over that? So the difference is coming from the city?
So that's what we're hoping to have you all fund, is that the difference. So up to 100,000, anything over. So right now, for sure, we know we have to do the 52.5 and 23,810 for the engineering overage.
Okay.
For sure, we have to pay that. So what we're asking is just up to 100 in case we have anything over in the construction. Right now, we're in the design phase, so we're not sure what that's going to come back at. In the beginning of 2021, it was right at 260, and that's the construction portion of our award. So it was really close then, and so we're not thinking it's going to be 260 this time.
So I'm trying to do my sources and uses here. The source of the 300 and how much? 350 is 100 from Tirz, 52
No,
plus
that's
23.
That's
Three
above.
fifty's the grant.
That's
350,
grant
so
money.
350 is the grant. 15% of that is our city match, so 52.5. That, so 426 is the total project.
Total of the project, okay, not the 350. And so, we're then asked to go up to 100. Where is the stop point, though? I mean, 100's the max, but if you don't spend whatever you spend, what's the layout of where all the funds are coming from? Because we're kind of
I can do.
up to 100.
So what we'll ask of the engineers is to break down that cost estimate for us, so it's, same as we would any other project. Here's what we can, here's this base cost, here's the add-ons. Everything beyond what we know we have funded, these things are gonna be extras. So I think our intent and our hope is to make sure that we get the Earl Garrett and Water Street portion first, then the Clay Street and Water Street portion, and if we can do the tree wells afterwards, then that's gonna be great. We're just not sure because of the cost of construction if we're gonna be able to do that. So really the excess on top of, so the matching ask at 52.5, cover the difference in the assumptions that were made in the grant for the engineers portion, which is 24-ish, and then if there is a need, just a little bit more cushion, because I can't get contracts, I can't get price guarantees for a day sometimes on some of these things, so it's hard for us to estimate exactly what that's gonna be when it gets time.
So the grant's 350 and we're 100, so 450 is the max.
Yes, unless it, for
426.
is
It's kind of a
right now
weird,
today,
yeah.
yeah.
And you're thinking that it could go up, so max would be the 450.
Yeah.
Right, because the idea is if, say you fund the 52.5 and the 24,000, so it ended up coming out to like 76,000 and some change.
76,310.
Okay, so
That's
76,310
That's the overage.
would be what we're gonna consider the engineering cost. And so in the event, the difference between the 100,000 and that gives them a little bit of cushion so that if something comes back over, then we would have, if we just approve the 76,310, then we would have to come back to
Come
this
back
board
and
again
do
and
it
say,
again.
can we have $5,000 or $10,000 or whatever it is. But approving the not to exceed would just say, hey, if this project goes beyond the Tirz portion of $100,000, then the city either has to go to CIP funds or another funding source and fill in the gap, or we have to modify the project to be able to say, okay, we're gonna modify the project, as Michael said,
And
to
we-
either
So what-
downgrade or.
And we've been working on value engineering every bit of
Yeah.
this,
I
you know.
understand, but at the end of the day, your guesstimate is this thing could cost 450 to do what we saw.
Correct.
Yes, sir.
And you
And it
may
could
not be able to get it done.
And it could be in excess of that.
Correct.
You
and
may
we
not
would-
be able to get it done, and
and
you're
we-
gonna stop at putting those tree wells. You're gonna stop before you do that, or go get CIP funding for the tree wells.
We'll have
Correct.
to treat that as a
That's,
separate
that's
project.
the third
possibly.
priority.
That's right.
Golly, that's a lot of money
Oh,
for,
trust me,
but
I,
I'm not arguing about the cost, I just, wow.
Well,
I have, oh, go ahead.
go ahead.
Well, I have questions about the grant. In writing the grant for the $350,000, I'm assuming that the grant included that we are at Tirz, we have Tirz funds. Yes, no? Okay, I'm saying, shaking your heads, no.
So the grant itself was a Main Street grant.
I
So
understand.
because our boundary is the Tirz boundary, that's why we're coming to all.
I guess what I'm getting at is the grant was awarded on certain criteria, right? The 350, okay. What if this board, not that we're going to, but what if this board said, no?
We'd have to find it somewhere else within the city if we wanted to continue the project.
And we're the first ask.
Yes,
yes, ma'am.
And we're the first ask because we're Tirz?
because.
Because we don't have any other projects? It's a lot of money.
As it stands, there is no other projects right now for the Tirz. It is, you know, we try to target the most restricted funds if we can for projects. You know, I think those estimates that Julie gave for next year, I mean, we're hopeful, right? But obviously, there's gonna be some protestation, but there'll be at least another 52 in that next year. So it won't deplete your budget outright. EIC is being asked to do several other projects, so that's the other area, to include downtown infrastructure for different projects.
But not this, it's not the scope of this.
No,
Okay.
no, ma'am. So we are trying to spread the wealth out, I guess, as much as we can. And, you know, given the fact that that's in your project and financing plan as, you know, one of the major goals and a 15% share of, you know, probably your overall, budget over the lifetime of the Tirz, you know, we thought it was an appropriate ask.
Gotcha.
Right,
So let me throw something else out, and I want to see how the funding piece of this works. So let's say that we want to use the Tirz to attract a business to locate, and give them the increment over time. Is that just, there's no cash exchanged, it's just their tax goes
Correct.
down?
It'd be a reduction of their taxes by the increment divided by how often you wanted to.
And I wasn't really being funny, I was really making a point that we don't have whatever that bottom number was, $402,000 in
No,
the
that's
bank to
correct.
spend.
Right.
We really just have the 116 or
That's
whatever
correct.
that number is, right? So this $100,000, although I guess at some point we'll get the tax into the increment into our account and we'll have it to spend, but we just don't have it all yet.
So
So when do you
some of-
think that happens?
Well, and you may wanna speak to timing, so what are you estimating, like, when would this cash actually be needed? So, you know,
So we're starting construction on the project in spring of next year is the hope, right?
And it comes out in draws, so it wouldn't be all at once.
Yeah, it doesn't need to be all at once. I don't think it needs to be hours. right off the bat, to the extent that it needs to be all of that all at once either. But we do need to have the funding allocated and budgeted
Right.
and approved for the match. So,
Typically, what we do on those kind of things with other boards is we leave it in the board's fund until a portion of those expenses are needed. And so, multitude of reasons, interest, revenue being the first one, especially as you build a fund balance, you give up interest revenue if we move money too soon. So we move money proportionately, just depending on when those expenses come in. And then there's a timeline that we actually talked through last week as far as we have to get to X progress before we can request reimbursement from, the granting entity and those kind of things.
So your budget says that you think pretty safely that between now and the end of the next fiscal year, 2023, we're gonna receive the increment
Right.
money
So-
into our account.
Right.
So what timing is there? What month do you think that
So,
happens?
we always say July because that's kind of where we wrap up, we're winding down. But when I went back and was doing some estimates, what we do is Bob sends me a report every month, and it says basically this is what we build in the Tirz, this is what's been collected in the Tirz so far. When collections exceed the base year, then technically we will start doing journal entries and moving money over. But if it's small proportionately, when it starts coming in, it's a couple $100, it's $2,000. We don't just do it every month. When it starts seeing, we can see a significant difference in the increment, then we usually do 2 or 3 journal entries, as they come in. Whenever there's a significant impact to the revenue, then we'll go ahead and do that journal entry and move that money over there. As the money grows, then that increment may be hit quicker. Because, we have to collect at least the base year before we can move anything. So this year, the first one got moved in March or April, somewhere around there. And then we moved another one in July. And so we'll have one more year-end entry that hopefully is that $5,400, and we're hoping to get all that. So we'll move that one at year-end whenever we get our final tax notification. So periodic, but we have to exceed that base year before we can make that entry. Does that help?
Yes.
Okay.
So the reason I'm asking those questions is, it leads to this next question. What other projects are out there that you guys know of at the city that may need the Tirz funding, and what's the timing of those projects?
so as of now, none. Again, I think we spoke to kind of the flux in the markets for
Right.
big projects, right? But everybody knows that a hotel was discussed as a major portion of how a Tirz could help with downtown, right? So those are ongoing, but those would have, I would say, 20 to 30 year implications, right? That increment would be paid back on however we would negotiate that. And so it wouldn't be, there'd be a net present value to that, but we wouldn't disperse that through the Tirz other than annually, and it would have a cap based on what was able, right? So if, let's say it was 50% or 65, 75% of the Tirz increment, then it would just be that value, however that's determined, right? But if it turns out to be that you got, 20 to 25 million, 35 million, and it kind of stays that way, you're looking at $280,000, $200,000 per year, probably conservatively, I'd say $200,000 a year. That could be used towards that. So it's the first project. There are no other projects. Yeah.
Well, I thought there was a project with lighting on on Clay Street and some murals
So
and
that's
some other
EIC.
things. So
that's
EIC took that.
EIC's they're gonna take, well, we're gonna request from city council that EIC reviews and takes a look at that.
Good.
Is it possible to approve a portion of what you're asking for? Like, would it, if it was the 54,000 or the 20, what was the other one? The
23,810.
23, is it possible to approve a portion of that, like the 23, and then y'all resource from somewhere else, or not that's what, I'm just
Yes,
curious if
that's
that's.
the
Yeah.
That's the purview of the board, so that's all possible, right? We will figure it out. I think it was, a lot of it was to simplify, right, what we were gonna do.
Right.
Any number of things could happen. We're gonna meet again in January. We need to have all of that sourced. before the project gets going, but if our match is 52.5, our engineering is $24,000 over that.
76,310 is what we need today to move forward.
Yeah, and if we come to it and the engineering has been completely fleshed out, and we know that that's gonna be another $25,000, it could be that, you know, we come back in January and ask the board if you're willing to consider that.
So
Go ahead, John.
let's be specific. You're asking for funding for the match plus engineering cost, period.
Plus a buffer of,
No?
we don't know what construction's gonna be.
Oh, so you want a buffer for a contingency for,
Yes.
That's
Up to 100. So for sure, we know we need 76,310. And then
based on the fact that this was all valued starting in
21.
2019, or 2021, sorry. So between the start of 2021 and now, I would say the start of April of this year and now is a monumental difference, so.
All right, you had a question before I.
23.8 is an increase in the engineering,
yes.
Yes.
but the total engineering contract can't be 100,000, so that's a huge increase in engineering.
So the grant is 350. A portion of that grant allocated 55,000 towards an engineering firm. Our engineering firm came back with 78,810.
As their original contract?
So yes.
So we knew we were behind when we got the contract from Kimley
So
Horn.
once we were awarded the grant funding, that's when we entered into contract. And under the award, the grant itself, it allowed 55. They did not come
Okay,
back
but
at
their
55.
contract was always for 77 or 78. So it's not an overrun from Kimley Horn, it's the difference between what the grant allows.
That's correct.
Correct.
Okay, all right, well then I'm much calmer.
Yeah,
I-
that makes a difference.
but doesn't that say the engineering cost on this project is 20% plus?
Yep.
For
So-
Yes.
civil engineering cost?
Yes.
For civil engineering
Yeah,
project?
based on the estimates of CDBG, right? So CDBG valued that at $55,000 and the market valued that higher.
Right, but what John's saying is it's 20% of the whole contract. $78,000 on 426. It's a lot of engineering.
On it. Well, or construction is a lot more than we think it is.
Everything's more than we think it is.
So this whole project may be,
Okay,
Yeah.
good
I
point,
want to
John.
remind us that we have $115,000.
Yeah.
Right.
$100,000 is 85% of what we have. And that's the first concern, that's a big take of what you have, that you know you have. And second thing, unless I missed an email somewhere, the first I heard of this was last week. And, to ask me to give you $100,000, Laura Gamble, who'll be 96 in 2 months, 2 weeks, 2 days, she maybe get $100,000 from me with 2 days' notice. But that's about the only person who could. I think that's a big ask without us having a better understanding of what we're being asked to fund.
Okay. Two questions, but first, thank you for all the work that's gone into this and for enduring the questions that we've asked. Part of that's related
We'll
to
stay here as
Fred's.
long as you want to get those answered.
Part of Fred's comment is like, okay, it's the first pop out of the box, and if we're gonna, when you're making the first decision like this, I think it's important that we understand what our paradigm is for how we approach projects. So the two questions I have is, okay, what really was the genesis of this project? I think I heard it's a Main Street project. So was it the Main Street Board said, oh gosh, we need to do this? Or was it stakeholders downtown that said, oh, it's a public safety issue at Clay and Water, it's an aesthetic issue at Earl Garrett and Water? I'm trying to wrap my head around, okay, who has the vested interest in saying, this is a great need in Kerrville and we think we ought to push this forward?
So the grant itself, the funding that we applied for is strictly for Main Street designated cities. So that's the first thing. The second one, this addresses accessibility. So when we have our grant administrators look at projects that we're looking at and just look at our downtowns and what our opportunities are, they go and look at our outdated ADA sidewalk ramps. They're very old. Some of them were uprooted with the bricks. Some of them have uneven bricks. So it was notified to us that we would qualify for this because of our downtown ADA accessibility currently. The Clay and Water Street, that one has been identified, we're trying to promote walkability in our 2050 plan. And currently, the only time that we have a safe intersection there is on Fridays with the stop. So that area was identified because the farmers market's there, the Heart of the Hills Heritage Center, they're starting to, start the process with remodeling that. So that area was highlighted as needing something to improve safety there for pedestrians. And then because we did have a little wiggle room in the total amount that we could apply for, that's when we went and looked at the tree wells. So it's a downtown project. The CDBG grant is a big umbrella over a bunch of different pots of funding. So this one it is a Main Street award because we are a Main Street designation, but it is not simply just a Main Street project.
So in part to answer your question, so this was reviewed and approved by the city council. So it's a city council priority.
So they were the advocates for this? And
Yes, sir, we can't apply for these things without the okay of the city council because it requires an expenditure from city coffers. So they approved this.
I think everyone in here knows that there's been some sensitivity about the bricks. So is this gonna address the bricks or is this separate from the bricks completely? So
specifically, no.
okay.
It's not going, the bricks as a whole, no. This is addressing the bricks that have been uprooted by the trees
Okay.
in
Not
those
the ones that are
areas.
degraded or
Right, the roots have just upheaved them, and it's just a big safety issue. But as a whole, no, it is not going to touch the
don't get me
bricks.
wrong. I think it probably needs to be done. I'm just sensitive to the fact that some people think, oh, they're from the government and they're here to help me, and that's not the help I wanted. And I think entering into this, we should have a clear understanding of what really is the value proposition in terms of, I think our charge is to enhance the economic value of the property in the Tirz. Now, it seems like it's a little soft to me. Is that going to enhance the economic value? Are there going to be businesses that will see benefit from this? Maybe, and that gets back to the question of who are the stakeholders, and have we assessed stakeholder awareness or interest? I mean, as Fred said, we got this through the agenda, and I looked at it like, wow, that'd be great, but I'm making decisions for people who live, breathe, and eat, and get their economic value out of this. Is that how they want this money to be spent? So those are the questions in my mind that should, in my mind, guide how we approach any project.
Well, I agree with that too, Kenneth and Pat. If we were several years down the road with this board, and this was a much heftier fund balance, this would make it not quite so
Critical.
as Fred says. On the surface, I don't argue at all with the need for what this is, and clearly CBDG funds thought the decision makers thought the same thing. Safety of our citizens and our visitors is paramount. But this is capital improvement, and today, Michael's right. We don't have any other projects in the wings. That's not to say tomorrow we may have the greatest project in the world come through here, and we only have $116,000. I would really hate to see us fund up to $100,000 on this project. I'm not even comfortable with the $52,000. Kate's right. When we could do something less than that. I personally feel strongly that we think long and hard before we fund anything for this project at this time.
I agree with you.
Can I ask what the group would like to see beyond what we presented today, so we can come back, because I think what we'd do, if we can't get to some kind of consensus today, or if you just, I mean, if you don't want to do it, then you don't want to do it, but if you need additional information, we'd probably ask that you come back, and
Sure.
I don't know
Well,
what that would be.
A question that I have, does the grant expire? And if so, when? The 350?
The timing for us needing to do this project expires, because we're on the front burner to get it done. So we'll find other sourcing, I guess, if we need to. for it.
I do know that the construction has to be complete next year or we do not receive the full funding.
Then that's the answer, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
But there's, and the funding issues that you brought up, and should we spend this money now or not, very well. But thinking about Tirz, and the city council has looked at this, and this project is based on accessibility and pedestrian accessibility. And if I remember correctly, TxDOT and the city engineer worked on this jointly, and there are other accessibility areas that they looked at. These are the ones that are downtown that were important to city council. And if we think about the cuts and the farmers market and the Heritage Museum and all that, the city council's focused on this because we want to be able to use that parking garage and continue to have safe pedestrian access. And I walk a lot. My office is not 7 blocks from here, and I'm embarrassed to say I drove down here tonight, but I was running late. and so I didn't walk. But normally I walk down here. I walk to city council meetings and P&Z meetings. And if we think about the cuts, and EIC is going to do the lighting, and the Heritage Museum that we're funding, and the city council's already approved that, and that's a different funding source. What we're being asked to do here is to be a team player with the city, and they're asking us for the redheaded stepchild piece, and whether we want to spend all our $100,000 or not is not what I'm trying to say. I think we should be part of this. This is part of a bigger picture for the city. And Fred, I agree with you. I didn't even notice it was in the packet until earlier this afternoon, and I had to go back to the packet to get a good understanding of what was going on, and we all still had questions. But I think we should really consider about at least funding. My thought, and I'm glad to make a motion if people are ready, is that we ought to fund the 50,000 part at least. But I would make a motion.
If you put that in the motion, I'll second it.
So what is the amount for the 50, Fred?
For the matching.
For the matching.
The city's match is 52,500.
So I would make a motion that we would
They'll have-
authorize,
So the attorneys have.
oh,
put
I'm
them
sorry,
like just in case.
I would recommend to the
Change that
city
value.
council approval of the funding for the project costs related to the CDBG Downtown Revitalization Program 2021 in the amount not to exceed
52,500.
$52,500.
I second that motion.
We have a second. I have just one question. So at what point in 2022, 2023 will we be back to where our fund balance is now? Do you think that,
I mean, it depends on property tax collections. You know, you have the January 31st, of course, deadline. So, you know, we'd be hopeful, depending on how many 50% payers we have. I don't think that happens too much on the commercial side. As I said, we didn't really see a full impact of Tirz funding until July. However, with a different tax base, it could be a completely different story this year. I think our first entry was about $4,000 or $5,000 before we hit that. But then as that June deadline came around for any of the half payers, they had to be paid by that. So anything after that then became delinquent. So,
So we're looking
June's
at
a good
maybe
number
June
for your
again?
total collection. But on that level, you know, I would be hopeful that it would be spring, if people pay like they're supposed to. And I may be able to tell you in January, you know, that enough people have paid that we have replenished that 52.5.
Okay.
And again, we would leave it there, in your fund until we need it. And essentially what would happen is it would be a transfer out of Tirz into the capital projects fund, because this project as a whole is tracked and expensed out of that fund.
So at what point do you guys estimate the first draw of whatever amount we agree on tonight is needed in the project?
I think construction getting done, we'll have some, engineering's not complete, right? So we will have some of that. The funding for that at this point will come out of the grant.
Do you fund us last or first?
Depends
Well-
on what, there's a timeline that we have, and it tells us what we have to do in what order, so we have to get to X point engineering, I think.
Yeah.
Then we'll request reimbursement.
It can't, I mean, so the next phase is the engineering, and this money couldn't go towards that. This money has to go towards the match. So, that's the next expense, is the engineering. So I would think if we were gonna get started with construction in spring, you could expect to see that money start going out in, I mean, it'll be, I think probably March, April.
I'm looking at
Could be.
trying to see what the timeline is.
But we have to
telling us.
have it approved and
Sure.
authorized before then. It has
But the
to-
reality would be that we may not have to expense this money
Correct.
until we've got money coming in from
So we
what
might be
we
a little
expect to
little
get.
bit higher
Yeah.
fund balance.
As long as
Yeah.
as long as you all on city council say yes to it and we've got it designated and encumbered, then that's sufficient for CDBG.
Correct. That way we can notify them that we have adequate funding to meet the need. And that, for them, it's the 52.5. Anything over that is gonna be on us to find those funds from somewhere else. So, to answer
It's
your
just-
question, until something really gets rolling, but we can't get rolling until we know
Sure,
we've secured the
sure.
funding, so.
Yeah. Well, I know we've got to commit if we vote on this, it's a true commitment and we have to say that it's gone in our minds,
Right.
but
It's gone.
Yeah.
it's gone. But again, if the cash is, we can't commit on something else. That's the other side of it, because we would have to wait till funds come back in the operating fund.
Procedural question. Our decisions now go to city council for approval?
Yes, sir.
So even if we say yay, they can say nay again, or yay plus, well, here's another.
They
50.
can't change
They can't
what
change-
we
Can't
vote.
change
I know, but they can add to it. Not from our funds.
Not from our funds.
Not from our funds,
It's a
but they can
hard
add.
approve or not.
Yes, sir. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, we're gonna have to go back to the drawing board to either find the engineering funds from, some other fund,
Yeah.
at the very least, so, we'll start there.
Well, I just think, and I'm speaking on behalf of me, but I think it probably is an echo of the rest of the board. If this was happening a year from now, you probably wouldn't have any problem getting the 100,000 out of us.
No,
Would
I
would that be
appreciate,
true?
well, 52.5 is a great number. That gets us down the road. So,
Well, I appreciate what Bruce is saying about we're in this partnership together.
Sure.
However, we have limited funds and there's stuff that may happen. And I don't necessarily, and I used to not like when people would say this, and I'm saying it right now, so shame on me. I don't like our money to be spent on things that are not going to directly have an impact.
this will.
Physically, it will have an impact
This will,
because you
absolutely.
are saving people from falling on their knees and suing the city. I get that.
Well, so when I was first on EIC, this will kind of,
Exactly.
I was like, man, we're putting
Yep.
water pipes and
Yep.
and sewage pipes in the ground. This is not a very fun job being on EIC. And the
Best thing to fund.
I was there with you, I know.
And the chair said, well, you're thinking about it wrong, because those water pipes, number one, kept an industry from moving out of town, and number two, it created value in that land that those water pipes went over that wasn't there before.
Yeah.
And, okay, it's not sexy, but I see where the value is. So I think there's some value in this project that we all know is there. But yeah, I reiterate, if it was a year from now, you probably wouldn't really have that much of a problem, but you might be asking for $400,000 if our budget's right. So I get where you're coming from, but again,
And just one other comment, and it may be a little bit counter to what my opinion I just voiced a few minutes ago, but the bricks are such a visual and an investment from people at $25, $40, $50. It may not seem like a big deal to us, but that is a public relations situation.
We will do everything we can to work through that to make as many
So-
people as we can happy.
Well, and I appreciate that. What my point is, though, when you go down this road, and that was the last thing that you said, if it goes over, the bricks, or that project is cut. Out of this project, we'll have to find something else to do that. Before you cut anything, my request would be,
I'm back.
please come back to us. We may tell you no, but please come back to us because of the public relations part of this. It goes back to Bruce, it goes back to Pat, it goes, everything what we've all said.
Any further discussion?
Just one request, I guess, if I can get the Jolly Rancher to stay put in my mouth. I think for future projects or discussions, if there could be an articulated, whether you call it a value proposition or expected benefit on the back end, that, you know, we anticipate that when this project's done, these are gonna be the benefits. And to state it.
I appreciate that, but I would also point out that street and intersection improvements is a listed one of 8 things.
Sure.
And I
Right?
agree.
I don't know how far we can go down the rabbit hole of articulating what they are, but
No,
I'm happy to do that.
with a project, if we want to repave Water Street, which is
Okay.
kind of ludicrous on its face, but it's an example, why would we do that? What would be the expected outcome? Is it an approved I mean, is it an eligible project? Absolutely.
Yeah.
But to do it, I think as a board or committee or whatever, this group however it's defined, has an obligation to understand we're investing this, what is the expected outcome? Other than, gosh, you're gonna have nice crosswalks. But is there gonna be benefit to the Triple HC? I can't say what
Yeah,
that is.
sure, I can't either, but, okay.
Or is it gonna be, you know, reduction? We've had X many falls or broken ankles or whatever, and we expect there to be half that over the next 5 years. I don't know what it is, but my point is,
I wanna know, so that way when we come back, we don't come back to this, because we can't have ex parte communications with you guys. We have to meet and discuss it here.
yeah, yes.
I can't bring it to you in
Yes.
any other format, so either it's at the meeting or we don't talk about it. And if we have to have multiple meetings when we run projects, we can I'm happy
Well,
to do that, right? So
I
if
think
it's
this
the
board-
first bite at the
I-
apple.
yeah.
We'd love to workshop, maybe. I can't speak for everybody.
Absolutely. No, even if it's a more frequent meeting where we are, you know, just getting more information to be able to educate ourselves on what we're approving or, you know, moving forward with. Because I agree with Pat as far as, like, I understand the importance of the project, but I do feel like it would be great to have more information, which I know that you're providing us with as much as you have here today, but like, you know, analysis, like what's, you know, is it a problem for people on a daily basis? Are we, you know, dealing with people falling and breaking ankles, suing the city? Is it, you know, what is the expected outcome? How do the business owners around there feel, or whatever it may be? And then is Water Street, that intersection, going to be closed for a period of time? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah,
Um,
all that. Yeah, good points.
And maybe this will help you out, because until we got here today, I didn't know there was temporary crosswalks down there. And what we're doing is alleviating that. I walk downtown, I understand that, yes, trees are ripping up sidewalks, but that wasn't articulated in here. I have a map, that this is what we're going to do, we're gonna do this and this and this. I need $100,000 to do it, and know why am I doing this?
Okay.
There's
Well, I
nothing
do
in
know
here to
that
tell me
the
why I'm
traffic,
doing this.
the traffic signal is the only traffic signal owned by the city of Kerrville, is that correct?
There's more than
Oh, there's
one
more
now.
now?
There's two or
There's
three.
three. Well, it's one of the ones.
It's one of the ones,
Yes,
right?
it
And
was the first.
it
and
just
only for a
blinked.
while.
Yeah.
It
The only
blinked
one
for the longest, it wasn't working, and I noticed the other day it's now,
Holdsworth is blinking right now.
Holdsworth's blinking right
I'm
now.
not excited about
So,
Saturday morning.
you know, things like that, we've had trouble with it, this is gonna create a better situation, I mean, those are,
Just more
could be that.
detailed,
Yeah,
understood.
please,
Sure.
all right.
Call
Any
the
other
question?
discussion?
Can we call the question?
No further discussion. Let's vote on we have a motion and a second, so we will vote on the motion. So all those in favor, raise your right hand. And that passes unanimously. All right, anything for item 6, executive session?
Sir.
I don't hear anything, so, we can move on. Any items for future agendas that you guys want to throw out there? So city staff can vote on it?
Not an item, but do you anticipate us meeting again this year, or is it again now January?
No, I mean, we don't. We have a January meeting, I think is the semi-annual, and that's it at this point.
And is it on the calendar already?
I will double check, and if not, I will send it to you.
Do we think it would possibly be beneficial to meet more frequently to be able to gather information about projects happening in town that, I mean, or get more information about what we're currently funding or any of those things? Would it be
Yeah.
better if we met more often?
I mean, it would have benefited us in this situation to
Right.
have had a little more, advance notice this was coming in our direction. We could have gotten familiar with the project before we had to vote on the funding. So that, I do know that there is a serious conversation being had on other projects in Tirz right now. Hotel being one of those. I'm privy to that information. So I do know that's going to happen. That's why I'm asking a lot of the questions about, okay, if we're going to incentivize Tirz, that's not cash, those kinds of questions, because, trying to prioritize what Tirz does with their money is important. And I think that if this isn't a cash call for that, if we have a little more advance notice that another project's coming, we need to meet on that. We don't need to just say, hey, this is Tirz and how the 65%, 95%, we don't even know what, we're all new at this, so
Well, maybe if
we don't know what you can
Yeah.
and can't do within those things, and we need more time than just the week of or a week before.
This is the
to
first
mull
ask that you
over.
all have had.
So,
Yes.
yes.
So,
Right.
we'll all get better at it,
So,
Of course.
from our standpoint as
but
well.
anyway,
To your point, whether it's at a board meeting or someone suggested a workshop, we're not operating in isolation. This is not the first tax increment reinvestment zone in the state of Texas. There are
Right.
many out there.
Right.
It could be helpful, I think, for us to, whether it's a show and tell or have somebody say, here are several examples of different ways that tax increment reinvestment zones have worked to enhance the economic value of the zone. And talk about that, because as you suggest, there are some non-cash ways to do that, and there's some different projects that in my square-headed thinking, I'm sure I have dreamed of.
so you guys are hearing what we're saying. So do you think that we need to meet more often, whether it is that a whole lot of this, approving of things more than just gathering information and sharing, what's coming?
No, and only because, unless, when a project really becomes an action, just like something we're really considering. They've come, they've asked, they've applied for it, they put pen to paper and said, we want to do this. It's just in theory. So then we'd just be talking about theoreticals. But I think what we can do as we move forward is when we know that there's going to be an ask, we can set that up where there's a meeting for the workshop, give you all a few weeks to digest that, come back again 2 weeks later or a month later, however the board decides, and then you've had time to sit, talk about it, right? Stew on it,
Digest it.
figure out what you want, ask your questions, and then I think you're able to make
Okay.
a
Yeah.
better informed decision.
Do y'all feel
That's
better
just me.
about that being
Yes.
our approach?
Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah, okay, good. So we're still only scheduling the quarterly meeting unless you guys have something coming about and give us
biannual.
It's biennial.
Biennial.
We started out quarterly, then we didn't have a lot of stuff.
Not biannual.
Semi-annual.
Whatever that thing is.
Okay, so, definitely that will be the way that we move this, unless you guys get wind that there's a project coming that you're gonna involve us in, and give us a meeting at least before you ask us to make a vote.
Yeah, absolutely. I understand that.
Okay.
Appreciate y'all. Thank you for
Right.
thank you for
So,
authorizing that
anything
part,
else?
because we get to go forward. That's fantastic.
All right, well, it's 5:17, and I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you very much for attending.